Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Everyone is talking about USC and Arizona State in the Pac-12 South. But what about Utah? The Utes started 0-2 in 2020 but won their final 3 games and now carry tons of momentum and talent into 2021, and they are absolutely Pac-12 title contenders. So again, guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, here to predict and analyze Utah's schedule and record for this 2021 college football season. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and also make sure to check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. Some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country. Make sure to sign up for those today before the season begins. So let's go ahead and take a look at Utah, guys. This is a team that everybody's kind of has written off. We are forgetting that 2 years ago, 2019, this team was 1 win away from making the college football playoff. When you look at them this year, Kyle Whittingham's squad is, in my opinion, a potential dark horse playoff team because of how much talent they return, how favorable the schedule lines up for them, and how much momentum they also carry into this season. Take a look at their roster. 10 starters back on the offensive side of the ball, and that doesn't even include a quarterback. Kyle Whittingham recognized that, went out and got himself a quarterback, bringing in Charlie Brewer from Baylor. He was one of the most highly sought-after quarterback transfers this last offseason, and he chose to come to Salt Lake City, threw for over 9,700 yards, over 9,000 yards, and 65 touchdowns in 4 years at Baylor. He's an experienced quarterback at the Power 5 level. He will thrive at Utah. When you look at what he has to work with, he has Brant Kuithe back at tight end, one of the best tight ends in the country. The entire offensive line is back, so he's going to be very well protected. And he has tons of running back help because Whittingham, again, utilizing the transfer portal beautifully. TJ Pledger is in at running back from Oklahoma. Chris Curry is in at running back from LSU. And they already have Micah Bernard at running back for a team that averaged 194 rushing yards per game. This Utah offense is going to be electric, maybe the best we've seen since that 2019 squad, which again has not been that long. The defense for Utah is always a strength under Kyle Whittingham. It's going to be no different now. 8 starters are back, and they have so much talent across the board. It starts, for me, with Devin Lloyd at linebacker. He returns as the leading tackler and just the true leader of this Utes team. Vontae Davis and Clark Phillips III are back in the secondary, a secondary that needs a little bit of improvement after allowing 257 passing yards per game, but the rushing defense is an area that they don't have to worry about. The Utes were 11th in the nation last year in stopping the run, allowing just 107.8 rushing yards per game. They're dominant up front, year in and year out. They're a team that's physical in the trenches. They're going to be that again in 2021. They tune up that secondary just a little bit, and this defense has the chance to be one of the best in the entire country. So we take a look at Utah's schedule, guys. Can they get back to the Pac-12 championship game? Again, 0-2 start last year, won their final 3. All this talent coming in, all of this transfers coming in. Everybody wants to talk about USC and Arizona State. Don't sleep on Utah. Well, they opened the season against Weber State. We're going to give them the win there. Don't have to worry about that. 1-0. They then go to BYU, travel to Provo. We got the Holy War. Now, this is one of the best rivalries, I think, in college football. Certainly one of the more underrated rivalries in college football. And I wish this matchup was played last year. I wish this Utah team was facing off against last year's BYU team because I think it would be an epic showdown. But unfortunately, it is not. BYU loses tons from last year's squad that went 11-1, namely Zach Wilson at quarterback, but they lose their leading wide receiver in Dax Milne, and they lose a handful of defensive starters and offensive line starters as well. I do believe that Baylor Romney or Jaron Hall will do just fine. I do believe they're going to do just fine at quarterback over the course of the season. But when I look at this game, guys, Utah is certainly going to own the edge in the trenches, both on the offensive line and the defensive line. They're going to shut down BYU's rushing attack with Tyler Algier, which means that Baylor Romney or Jaron Hall is going to have to win this game through the air. Even though Utah's secondary is a little suspect, still needs some improvement, I just don't see BYU being able to do that. Despite the game being in Provo, the Utes will beat their in-state rival. They move to 2-0. They then travel to San Diego State. That's not an easy game. A team, the Aztecs, out of the Mountain West, not going to be an easy game because they are also known for their defense. So this has an opportunity to really test this Utah offense. But at the end of the day, I still believe that Utah is a little bit bigger, more physical, has more speed than the Aztecs. A team that's a Mountain West title contender for sure, but does not have enough to beat the Utes, even though the Aztecs will host this game. That's one thing they have going for them and that Utah needs to be aware of. But I do believe the Utes do get this win. They then get into conference play, guys. From here on out, Washington State on September 25th to the end, it's all Pac-12 conference games. So they open up against the Cougars, as we just mentioned. Last year, Utah trailed 28-7 at halftime. Trailed 28-7 at halftime against Washington State. But the Utes battled back and ended up winning that game 45-28. They outscored the Cougars 38-0 in that second half. And this is an opportunity, guys, for I think Charlie Brewer to really settle in and have his best game as a Utah Ute. Because Washington State had one of the worst secondaries in the nation last year, allowing 307 passing yards per game. So Brewer and this wide receiver core, along with Brant Keithy at tight end, could light it up against the Cougars, especially with the game being in Salt Lake City. Nick Rolovich enters year 2 in Pullman with a very young team. The Cougars will get there, but they don't have enough to come on the road and beat Utah, and they're not going to be leading at 20-21 at halftime. I can promise you that. Utah 4-0, getting their bye week at the beginning of October, and then it's one of the biggest games of the year for them. Again, we mentioned USC and Arizona State are the two teams that everybody wants to talk about in the Pac-12 South. Well, Utah gets those two teams in back-to-back weeks. Travel to USC on the 9th, and then they get Arizona State a week after. So those two games really will make or break Utah's season in the sense of, are they going to contend for a division crown? Are they going to have a shot at the Pac-12 championship game? So it starts with this USC game. Last year they lost to the Trojans 33-17, lost by 16 points. And again, take everything with a grain of salt in the Pac-12 from last year. Obviously, Utah dealt with some injuries in that game. It was early on in the season. It was just a wild year for everybody across the board. And I look at this USC team, guys. We know they are legitimate Pac-12 title contenders. Keaton Slovis is back as one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He has a loaded wide receiver core with that air raid offense that Graham Harrell has implemented. The game is at the Coliseum, and Todd Orlando, now in year 2 as defensive coordinator, should do even better things with this Trojans defense as they return 6 starters. They can improve that secondary a little bit themselves and that rushing defense, but mostly the secondary. They're going to be just fine. Now look at USC here, guys. Utah benefiting from the bye week. One of the biggest games of the year. They're getting a bye week before. That's huge. But I don't know if they're going to have enough to come into a hostile Coliseum, a hostile road environment where, again, home field advantage could play a bigger role than we have ever seen in college football. And I really think, obviously, at this point in the year, this is going to be the toughest passing attack that Utah's secondary has faced. And again, that was our biggest concern for the Utes on defense, was their secondary and how they need to tune that up. I don't know if they're going to face an offense that really has threatened them, has challenged them until they face USC. I think Keaton Slovis and his team get the job done, and the Utes are handed their first loss on October 9th due to their inability to stop the pass. It will be much closer, though, I will say, than 16 points like it was last year. They then host Arizona State in Salt Lake City. Just because they lost to USC does not mean that Utah is out of the title race, guys. That's one conference loss. USC has a handful of tough games. Arizona State has a handful of tough games. They still have to play each other. Everything's still alive and well for the Utes. They play Arizona State at home, an Arizona State team that averaged 264.2 rushing yards per game. Now, again, take that with a grain of salt because they only played 4 games. But the Sun Devils do return plenty of talent. Jaden Daniels is back at quarterback as one of the best in the conference. I think one of the best in the country. Rashad White is back at running back. Their leading rusher averaged 10 yards per carry last year. And their defense, many believe, is one of the best in decades for the Sun Devils. Now, do keep in mind, as of this filming, we know nothing about Arizona State and their recruiting violations. We know they committed them. We don't know what kind of sanctions will be imposed on them going forward, and if those will even be imposed and enforced before the season begins. If they are, we might come back and revisit what we predicted for the Sun Devils. But we've already predicted Arizona State, and if you watch that video, you know we think they lose to Utah. We do believe the Utes win this game against the Sun Devils. Arizona State wants to run the ball this year. Well, not many teams have success running the ball against Utah. I don't believe the Sun Devils are going to be an exception. The Utes at home shut down this rushing attack, forced Jaden Daniels and a relatively young core of wide receivers to win this game through the air. And while Daniels takes phenomenal care of the ball, Utah's secondary, having already been tested the week before against a tougher passing offense than Arizona State will have, steps up big, and the Utes get a crucial home victory to keep their Pac-12 South title hopes alive. Because if they lose this game to the Sun Devils and they lose to USC, they will not win the division. They have no shot because they will not own a tiebreaker over either of those two programs. But we do believe they beat the Sun Devils. They go back on the road to take on Oregon State. That was Utah's first win last year. They beat the Beavers 30-24. And look, Oregon State to me is quite the anomaly. I think they have plenty of talent there, but it's such a brutal schedule for the Beavers that their final record is going to look a lot worse than this team is. This team's a lot better than what we believe their final record will be. And I believe that Utah has enough to go on the road and beat the Beavers here. Their defense allowed 217.6 rushing yards per game, and they might improve a little bit. But with that triple threat that Utah has with Pleasure, Curry, and Bernard all in the backfield, I believe Charlie Brewer takes a slight day off, and the Utes go into Corvallis and beat the Beavers behind the strength of their running game. They then return home to take on UCLA. The Bruins, what do we have to expect from them in year 4 of Chip Kelly? This is by far his best team yet, but can he get them to the postseason? They return 19 starters, but the area of concern for me is not their offense, it's not their rushing defense, it's their passing defense. They're ranked 114th in the country last year. They had one of the worst passing defenses in the country last year. And this, to me, has the opportunity and the possibility to be a shootout. Teams trading blow for blow because UCLA has a very potent offense, as we know. I believe Utah's offense takes a major step forward. But I believe this is another game where, similar to that Washington State game, as we mentioned, Charlie Brewer goes off. Charlie Brewer has a big day at home against this Bruins secondary that I think improves a little bit, but not as much as it needs to get to the point where Chip Kelly wants to be. The Utes will defeat UCLA at home. So just like that, guys, they are 7-1, one conference loss. Not only are they still in the Pac-12 title race, but at 7-1, they are still possibly in the college football playoff hunt. 100%, especially if they were able to win out. They win out, they beat maybe a solid Oregon team in the Pac-12 championship. They have a solid case for the playoff, but we're still 4 games away. The month of November is always wild for college football. Upsets left and right, non-stop madness in the month of November, and that's really where you separate the contenders from the pretenders. And I look at this game at Stanford, guys, on a Friday night, a short week for the Utes. And I think you're going to find out that Utah is a bit of a pretender, at least on the national stage. We believe they fall to Stanford on the road. I think you can make the case that Stanford's defense will be one of the toughest that Utah faces all year long. I believe secondary-wise, Stanford and Arizona State will have the 2 best secondaries, maybe with the exception of Oregon, but up until this point will be the 2 best secondaries that Utah's faced. I believe Charlie Brewer struggles a little bit in this game against Stanford because this is a team, guys, that their back 7 for Stanford, that linebacking core and that secondary, is going to be elite. 8 starters back on defense. Davis Shaw is going to have his team ready to go. My biggest concern for Stanford all year long has been their offense. What's their offense going to look like? Well, by November 5th, I believe Jack West finally settles in. I believe they finally settle in. And I believe their running game starts to take off. You start to see flashes of brilliance towards the end of 2020. I think that carries over into 2021. And I'm not saying they're going to exploit this Utah rushing defense because they're still going to be one of the best in the country. But I believe behind the strength of their defense, Stanford gets just enough going in this game. And on a Friday night, first game of November, they pull off a major upset. Right after that, Utah gets a bit of a tune-up game for Oregon. They go on the road to play Arizona, and I think they crush the Wildcats. Arizona's a bad, bad team, guys. New head coach in Jed Fish, quarterback questions, one of the worst defenses in the country last year. They're in a bad state. It's their 5th head coach in 20 years. They're going to have to take a lot of time to rebuild. And Arizona, who I think is the worst team in the Pac-12 going into this year, is not going to beat one of the better teams within the division. Utah wins comfortably and then closes out their year with back-to-back home games against Oregon in Colorado. Now, this game against Oregon is a rematch of that 2019 Pac-12 championship game. If you remember, Oregon beat Utah in blowout fashion and ruined the Utes' college football playoff hopes. Utah wins that game, they are going to the college football playoff. So a bit of a revenge on their mind, a bit of revenge on Utah's mind coming into this game. And again, home field advantage playing a huge role, guys, something that I think, again, going to play one of the biggest roles in college football that we've seen in recent memory. So an opportunity for Utah to get revenge over the Ducks at home in the second to last week of the year. It's a huge, huge trap game for Oregon, who at this point is still, I believe, going to be in the college football playoff hunt. And I think Utah gets their revenge over the Ducks. 2 years after their playoff hopes getting crushed, Utah crushes Oregon's playoff hopes. It's a major, major trap game for the Ducks. You don't want to come on the road to a hostile environment and play a team like Utah that late in the year. I think the Ducks get caught in this trap in Salt Lake City. Utah's defense steps up big, shuts down that RPO offense that Oregon's going to be running. I think it's a relatively low-scoring game, but the Utes are going to get the job done at home. I truly believe that. And they close out the year with a senior night victory, in our eyes, against Colorado. Last year they trailed 21-10 against Colorado, but they ended up winning 38-21. So kind of like that Washington State game. They trailed by 21, scored 38 unanswered. In this Colorado game, they scored 28 unanswered and won by 17. It just showed how strong this Utah team could be and what a tale of two halves it was over the course of their final stretch of the season. You're not going to see a tale of two halves this year. Colorado's run game is going to be their strength. Utah's run defense is their strength. I don't really have much faith in Brendan Lewis, the new quarterback for Colorado, to get the job done through the air, especially in Salt Lake City on senior night, high after an Oregon win, and maybe this win potentially clinching them a spot in the Pac-12 championship, depending on what Arizona State and USC does over the course of the year. Utah wins this game against the Buffaloes, and Utah finishes 10-2. 10-2 with a loss at USC and an upset loss at Stanford. We truly believe, guys, the Utes are that good. 18 starters back. Key transfers at running back. The key transfer of Charlie Brewer at quarterback. The missing piece, potentially, for Utah. A lot of momentum coming into 2021. It's going to continue to carry over. Remember, they're getting overlooked big time. Do not sleep on Kyle Whittingham and the Utes because they're going to make you pay for it. This is a Pac-12 South title contender. This is a Pac-12 title contender. This is a playoff dark horse. They avoid the loss at Stanford. They avoid the loss at USC and go 11-1 or better. They are going to be one win away, again, from making the college football playoff just like they were 2 years ago. So, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. And also make sure to check out everything down in that description below. That includes those expert picks. Make sure to sign up for those on our website today before the season begins. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.